Right, we are all welcome again to today's class, and this is the third week, and I'm sure you are as excited as I am. I know it's been a very interesting journey so far, and today we'll be looking at something more interesting. But before that, I would say please subscribe to my channel in case you have not done that, and my handle is at Master Data with Dave on YouTube and other social media platforms. Right, today's objective we've grouped into two. We have advanced Excel features. We'll be looking at conditional formatting and then named ranges. Also, we'll be looking at pivot tables and pivot charts, creating and analyzing pivot tables, and then using slicers in pivot tables. Right, this is the file we'll be working with today, and we'll be looking at conditional formatting. Conditional formatting. That means formatting our workbook or our worksheet based on some conditions. But before we go into that, we can see that the H colon is not visible. We can see that the department colon is also not really visible. So we need to expand it and make every colon and every cell visible. So what do? I click on this triangular sign and then double click. And then now I can see everything. And if you want to make it more interesting, you can change this worksheet into a table. Remember how to change the table? You Control A on your data, then Control T. Then I say my table has headers, and then I click OK. And then there we go. That looks better. Okay, now if you want to do conditional formatting, okay, if I remove the filter so that I have just the table. Now I want to format my table so that in the performance score column, any cell that has less than 3 is colored red. So that at a glance, I can see the ones that are not performing, up to standard, that are performing below, the average, assuming our average is anything below 3. So what do? I can highlight the column, go to conditional formatting. On my screen, you can see it at the center top part of the screen. Click on conditional formatting, click the drop down arrow, and then you can, highlight cell rules. Of course, you can manage rules, you can create new rules, or you can just highlight cell rules. Now, what I'm looking for is less than. So I want to conditionally format any value less than 3. So I click on the less than, and then format cells that are less than what, I put 3 in the colon, in the space I put 3. And then what kind of formatting do I want? Do I want a light red field with dark red text? Do I want a yellow field with dark yellow text? Green field with dark green text? Light red field, red text, red border? Or I want to customize it? I want to customize it. So what will I do? I will click on the custom formats. Now it has brought the dialog box. Then I can see, okay, under the fonts, what do I want to do? I want the color to be white. And then in the fill, I want the fill to be deep red. And that is it. You can decide to even make it bold, or you can make it regular, or you can increase the size. You can just format it the way that you want, anything that works for you. Then you click OK. And then you click OK. So if you look at the table, you can see anything below 3 is red. Anything below 3 is red. It makes it easy for you to spot, when you're looking at performance metrics, you can even format it, just the way that works for you. Right. After applying conditional formatting, you can still filter, your worksheet based on that formatting. For example, if I come to sort and filter, click the drop down arrow, click on filter, then I click the drop down arrow on the performance score. Then I want to filter it by color. I have just two options here. So of course I have the one that are colored by red and the ones that are not colored. So if I choose the ones that are colored by red, it brings it just shows me those ones alone. If I come back and I click on the filter by color, filter by font color, I can also filter by that. Of course, it's the same. So imagine you have more than one color in your sheet. You can, filter like that. So the next function we want to look at is creating a named range. A named range. For example, I don't want to be typing out a range when I'm using a formula. For example, I want to calculate the average salary, sum of salary. I don't want to type equals to sum, open bracket. Now I like the entire colon E. I can make it easier for myself. For example, you are working with this sheet every day. Maybe every day you have to look at performance metrics, you have to look at attendance, you have to look at, it is something you do every day. It won't be wise that every day you have to be highlighting and saying it equals to this, and then you are highlighting the range if there's a better way to do it. Remember, it is working smart. Working smart. So what do we do? I would highlight the salary. So if I highlight the colon salary and then come to this, if you look beside your formula function, your formula bar, to the left of it, you can give it a name. So if I give it a name called salary, and I press enter, if I click outside, it is gone. I can't see salary there. But the good thing is that if I come to cell I2 and I type equals to sum, open bracket, and then I type salary, I can see the option there. Of course, that means inside that cell I2, I can type a new formula. That means equals to sum. I can now highlight the number or say the cell, comma, the next cell, comma, the next cell. Or I can just double click on this salary and then close the brackets. If you look closely at colon E, the entire colon E has been highlighted because that is what I named as my salary. Then I press enter. So that is the sum of the salary. Now, it's because this is a table, that's why it is, filling it up. Right, I'll do that again. I'll just say, let me delete it. And I say is equals to sum, open brackets, then start typing salary. And then I can see the range there. I just double click on the salary. And then I close the brackets. And then I press enter. And this is the sum of the salary. If you make it comma, it's 5,205. If you want to double check to be sure that maybe Excel is not correct, come here and then click auto sum and then press enter. If you put the comma, you can see that the salary is actually the same. 5,205,785. Come back here and then it is, oh, okay, because that has been added. Okay, so we know the number 5,205,785. So if I delete this and I come back here, it is the same thing, 5,205,785. So it has added it before, since it's still in the same column. So still on the named range, I want to create a named range for the performance range. So if I highlight colon G and I name it performance range, that's performance range, while the cursor is still blinking, and I just press enter. So that range is performance range. Now, if I come here and I press equals to average, double click on the average, then start typing performance. I can see the performance range. I double click on it and then I close it and I press enter. You can see its performance range, then I press enter. So the average is actually 3. And if you check and you find the average to be same. So if I use my formula equals to average, if I double click on it, then I highlight the whole column where I have values, and then I come back and I close it and I press enter. The answer is the same. Right. When you are creating a range, a named range, you must not highlight the entire column. For example, if I name the first 15 cells as bonus management, bonus MGT. I know that's the bonus I'm paying to the management staff, and I press enter. And then I say is equals to sum. I double click on the sum, and then I say bonus. I can see the bonus MGT there, and I double click on it, and then I close the brackets, and I press enter. That is 67,639. That is not the sum for this column, but it is the sum for the first 15 cells. If I highlight the first 15 cells, and I come towards the lower part of my cell, of my sheet, I can see the sum, 67,639, which is the same thing as what I have here. But remember that other cells were not selected. So that means you can actually select a portion of the column to just name that part, not necessarily the entire column. So we're moving on to pivot tables. Very interesting, very, very powerful. I mean, if you say you know Microsoft Excel, you can use that application, and you cannot work well with pivot tables, then you're not ready for data analysis. It is simple, it is straightforward, but it is also dynamic. It depends on how much of it or how well you can use it. Yes, how well you can use pivot tables. So I'll say a pivot table is one of Excel's, most powerful features. And that's why Excel is still very relevant, even in today's data analysis world. Pivot tables, very important. Like very, very important. I can't stress the importance enough. And it is used to summarize, to analyze, to explore, and to present large amount of data. You are able to present that large, very big data. You're able to summarize it in a split of seconds. And then instead of, manually creating tables, using formulas, you just use your pivot table, and then you have your answer. You can use it to group, you can use it to look at trend, just in a split of seconds. And why is it important? It saves manual work. It saves time that I would have used for manual work. Imagine me, I want to, look for the trend over time. I want to look at the salary, by the department or by the location. If I have a pivot table, I don't have to be manipulating my formula or my charts. I can just be clicking and dragging my fields where I want. Now, straight to pivot table. How do you create a pivot table? While clicking in your data anywhere, go to insert, and then you can see pivot table here. Of course, you have the drop down arrow you can choose, but because we are using from a table range, which is what we have here, not from an external data source, so you just click on the table or range, or just click on the first option. Once you click on it, it's asking you, select a table or range. So if the highlighted data set is not what you want to use, you still have the opportunity to select a new data range. That means Excel has selected this particular cell, this particular worksheet, assuming this is what you want to work with. But if that is not the case, you can come back here, and then, even if it is another sheet, you can just come into the lower part of the cell, click on the sheet you want to work on, and then highlight the data. Or if you know the name of the table, can put the name of the table there. Now, choose where you want the pivot table to be placed. Do you want it to be placed in a new worksheet or in an existing worksheet? That means if you click on a new worksheet, it's going to create a new worksheet just beside the one you have. So if you have sheet 1, it will create a sheet 2. But if you want it to put it in the existing worksheet, that means inside this sheet 1 is to just create the pivot table inside of it. But for me, I feel it's fine to, put it in a new worksheet. Then I click OK. So this is your pivot table. It looks blank. It looks like, what's this? But let's see how interesting it can be. Now, let's say I want to view the payment by location. That means I want the location and I want the amount by the location. What will I do? We can see from your right hand side, you can see the pivot table fields. At times it may be disabled or like it's not visible. So if it's not visible, make sure that your pivot table is selected. That means now my pivot table is not selected. So I have to click within the pivot table for it to come up. And at times, even after clicking inside the pivot table, it's still not showing. Come to the pivot table analyze, menu, then you will see the field list. So if it is not selected, you will not see the list of the fields. Once it's not there, just click on it, it will come back there. Right. So I want to see the location by the amount, by the salary. So I can click and drag the location into the rows and then drag the salary into the values. Now, if you look at this is a second sheet, sheet 2. If you go back to sheet 1, if you look at the location, if you click the drop down arrow, you can see we have just 4 locations. So what Excel has done is anyone that belongs to Berlin, Excel has summed up all their salary. And that's why you have in the pivot table, you can see Berlin, this is the entire salary they have. For London, this is what they have. For New York, this is what they have. For Tokyo, this is what they have. And I can do that just at the snap of the finger, and I can just copy this, and you can just copy this and then take it to my PowerPoint and then make a presentation, new slide, and then just paste it. You can paste it as a picture and just make it big. And then you can tell management, okay, in Berlin, this is what we have, blah, blah, blah. Just format it the way you want it. You can decide to make it, in currency format. You can decide to make it currency. And showing pounds, if you want it in dollars, you come to more, and then under the symbol, you just change it to Canadian dollar, and then click OK. That's that. Now imagine, okay, I've done that. I'm making it, I want to create a presentation. I've gotten the salary by the location. I also want the salary by the department. I just remove the location was there. I just click on it and drag it out. It is removed. Then I click on the department and drag it back to the rows. And then I have HR, I have IT, marketing, and then sales. What if I want colon as well? You can put anything in the colon, let's say by gender. So you can see the female, this is how much they get in HR. And then the male, this is how much they get. And this is a grand total. In IT, the same thing, you can see the breakdown. If you don't want it by gender, you want it by location, just remove the gender from the colon and then put the location there. So HR, Berlin, this is how much they have. Marketing, London, you can see it. New York, sales, you can see it. And then you have the total for the row and the total for the colon. You can see the total for each column and then total for each row. Right, so for my pivot table, of course, I can modify what I want to see. For example, if I don't want the totals to show, I can just come under the design. After while selecting the pivot table, make sure you're selecting it, the pivot table, not outside of the pivot table. So you select the pivot table, come to the design, then under the grand totals, you can decide to take it off for rows and column. You can put it on for rows and column. We can put it on for rows only or on for columns only. So whichever works for you, but I think it's fine to have it there so that I can see the total. But if I remove it on for the rows only, I can see the grand total for the rows. And if I want on for the columns only, I can see the total there. But if I want it for all, I can see it there. Another thing we can do is to, change, you can rename anything. Instead of having sum of bonus, you can just leave it as bonus. Instead of having, okay, it already exists, I can just say bonus breakdown. Then I can expand it. Instead of having colon labels, if I don't want it visible, for example, what will I call it? Colon labels, because it's just for you to filter either male, female and male. So if I choose just male and I click OK, I'll see just the male. If I say female only and I unselect the male, it shows me just for the female. So that's what that button is there for. But if I don't want it to make my report look awkward, like what's going on label, there's always a way around it. I'll just come to click outside. Click in cell, let's say cell C3, click on Format Painter, and then drop it on. Okay, that doesn't work. Let me change the color of my text to a background color. So if I come here and I choose my text and I say the color I want is just something very close to, yeah, that's it. Something that is the same thing as a background color so that you are not seeing anything there. It's not written, but my button is still there. I can still filter. It's just to make sure that, yes, you are looking really professional. You don't want to leave this as role label. You want to call it, say, departments, so that when you're presenting, somebody's not asking you, what's role label? And then grand total means grand total truly, so that's fine. And then that's it. And then, of course, you can put a title here. Say, I want HR reports May 2025. And then I want to, merge and center, make it bold, increase the size, and then maybe change the background color to something, maybe this. And then that's it. And of course, you can click on your pivot table, come to the pivot to the design, and then you can change the way to look like, you can change the design. Just choose anything that works for you. As I said, you should work with the color of your organization. So if you have colors that you should use in your organization, then that should be what you should use. But if you don't have, you won't go wrong with the default color. Otherwise, you can just choose it the way you want it. And also, while in your data, if you want to change the name of your table, instead of when you want to insert your pivot table, you have so many tables, let's say in the workbook, and you click insert pivot table, you want the name to show here so that you can always refer to it. What you can do is to highlight the table and then go to the table design, and then you can see the table name here. Just put the name that you want, HR_data. Let's see. And that's it. But if I do HR data, it will complain because the space is not, Excel doesn't want the space there. So if you want to space it out, just use the underscore, and then we all know that that's fine. So by the time you do insert pivot table, and then you can see that the table range is HR data, and they are sure that, yes, that's the table I want to use, or that's the range I want to use. Right, so the next thing we want to look at now is pivot charts. So we have the pivot table, which is what we just created here. But can we create a chart based on this? For example, if I have my department and I have my location as a colon, can I create a chart based on this? Yes, I can. So what do I do? Click in the pivot table, go to inserts, and then you can choose recommended charts or choose any one that you want. So if I choose a colon chart, just that, and then Control Z. We can see these charts. We can see the sum of salary. We can see the department, and then it is now broken down into locations. And of course, you can double click and change it. You can change the name, the label. For example, let me say if I come here, click on this drop down arrow, and I want to see just Berlin and New York, and I click OK. It automatically affects the chart as well. So if I click OK, so what I can see now is just Berlin and New York. So if I want to change this sum of salary, if I come to the table itself and I say salary breakdown and I press enter, that's affected in the chart as well. Instead of location, I can say I think location is fine. Let's say I can format the color, just come to format, change the field that you want, just whatever works for you. Remember, the color code for your organization should work with that. So one more thing I want us to look at today is slicers. So if I delete my charts, just highlight the chart and press delete. Then I click in my pivot table. Then I want to insert a slicer. What is a slicer? For those that eat pizza, you know that pizza comes in slices. So that means I want to slice out a part of a data. For example, I want to just view for HR and IT. I can, while clicking inside my data, my pivot table, I can go to inserts. I can go to pivot analyze, sorry, and then I click on insert slicer. Now, based on this data, what do I want to slice it by? Let's say I want to slice it by location, and then I want to slice it by gender. That would be very interesting to see, and maybe by department. Then I click OK. Just select the ones you want and click OK. So I have my slicers here. So let me ensure that all of my data here are selected. Then I click OK. So now here is my data. So that I can see everything. So now, let's say I'm making a presentation, and then I want to see this is the of course the report for May, but I want to see for just May, for just male, not for female. So I just click on my male, and that is it. That's just it. If I want female, I click on female, and you can see that it is changing. That means in New York there was no female for that period. It's because it's blank. If I want both, I can control and click on the male, and then it brings out the data for all. If I want Berlin and New York alone, I click on Berlin and I hold on my control key and then New York. So that's Berlin and New York. If I want everything, I can, clear my filter. If I click clear filter, everything is selected. If I want HR, IT, and sales, click HR, IT, and sales with your control key. And then this is HR, IT, and sales. If I want to see everything, I clear my slicer.